What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Maziquie, aka Unique Mazique. I am the hardest working man in sports and gaming. And this is a special episode of Heavy Presents I'm Just Saying with Brian Mazique. And it's my pleasure to speak with Rohit Ponnaiya of Covers. How you doing today? We're going to talk some NFL.
I'm good, man. How are you?
I am fantastic, man. You know, it's nice, bright sunshine. It's cold as ever out here in the Chicagoland area, but, you know, it is what it is. It's pretty cold as far as the Bears locker room as well, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk a little bit about what I would consider probably the biggest story in the NFL right now, and that's this Antonio Brown situation. Can you tell me, what do you make of this? What do you think this means for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they're going into the postseason?
You know, from the narrative of it being a distraction, I don't think it's going to do anything. I think we saw that in that game. It couldn't have been more of a bigger distraction in the middle of that game, down against the Jets. And what do? They give the ball to Brady and they come back and win. So from that narrative, I don't think it makes a big difference. What does make a big difference is him being on the field. And, I think a month ago, maybe they wouldn't have missed him quite so much. But now you've got Chris Godwin done for the year. And that really changes the dynamic of this team. You look at this team before, and they had Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown. And now you're reduced to just Mike Evans. And, that could make a big difference in the playoffs when you go up against some teams that have a shutdown corner that'll match up against Evans. And then all of a sudden you're down to your fourth receiver on the Bucs. When I look at that from the Bucs' point of view, I don't think that necessarily means they're, out of the Super Bowl or anything like that. This is still a very good team. Brady's always been really good at going through his progressions, spreading the ball around. He still has Gronk there, of course. But I think the Bucs really have to change their approach, because one thing they've done way too much this season has been passing the ball. And, I mean, obviously they're good at it, but this is a team, I think they passed the ball in 66% of all their plays this year. That's the highest in the league, and that's not even close. I think the next closest team's the Jets at 63%, but the Jets are always down by 20 points, so they're always throwing the ball. The Bucs are up all the time and just keep throwing the ball. And so I think they're going to need to start leaning on that running game a little bit more. They're going to need to have more of a balanced offense if they want to succeed in the playoffs.
Yeah, and there's some concerns there, even from the running game, with some health issues, and not the offensive line, but the backs themselves. And had to sign Le'Veon Bell late in the season just to kind of do some patchwork there. But now, as far as the receiver situation with Antonio Brown, we saw a video with Terrell Owens making himself available. He's 48 years old, but we all know he's like a freak of nature. He stays in some sort of physical shape that I'm not even sure he's from Earth, right? Because of the shape he's in. How realistic do you think it would be that the Bucs could seriously consider signing T.O.? And if it's not T.O., is there another free agent wide receiver who you think they might call on to fill in because they're really concerned about their depth at the position?
As much as I'd like to see a T.O. Back there, I don't think you're going to see a Lance Stevenson performance from him. He's really pushing up there in years. Still obviously a physical specimen, but stepping right back into the NFL is a big ask for anyone. Honestly, beyond that, I don't really think there's many players out there that they can just kind of sign off the street and have step into that sort of role. I think they're better off just kind of looking to the depth guys they have right now. Guys like Scotty and like Perriman, guys like that, guys who can come in off the bench, guys who already have that chemistry with Brady and know this offense and can kind of fit in, because trying to bring someone in at this stage of the game is too much when they need to adapt to a completely different offensive scheme and get on track with Brady.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Tyler Johnson. I know he didn't play great against the Jets, but I am interested in seeing what happens if he gets an opportunity, especially with a week or so to prepare and understanding the role Absolutely. That he'd be playing. So let's switch gears a little bit, talk about the Packers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is having another phenomenal year. Like, he throws an interception like every once a year or something. It's just insane, right? His ability to take care of the football. Is this a year that you can see him and the Packers finally getting over the hump and winning another Super Bowl?
It's really tough because I look at this Packers team, and in some ways they've just done so much this year. They played so well. 13 wins already, could end the year with 14 wins. They're going to have that bye. These are all great things for sure, but I think, and they're also starting to get a little bit healthier too. They've had a lot of bad injuries to some really key players, but I think J.R. Alexander and David Bakhtiari might end up playing this weekend, might be back for the playoffs. Zadarius Smith could be back. So you have a lot of things in their favor. At the same time, I'm not sure if on the whole this team is much different than the team that wasn't quite good enough the last few years. I look at this team on defense. I still think that they have too many holes. They really struggled to stop the run. We saw that against the Browns 2 weeks ago. We saw that against the Ravens 3 weeks ago. We saw that against the Bears 4 weeks ago. And I just think there's a lot of question marks with this team on defense. There's some question marks on offense, whether they can succeed when teams lock down on Adams. And I also think there's questions on special teams. And I think just in general, I'm looking at this Packers team, and I'm not sure if they're any better than the teams that weren't quite good enough the last few years. They haven't done a whole lot to improve externally, and I don't really know if that internal growth has been there either. They've won a lot of games this year, and it does say a lot when you win close games, but it also says a lot when some of those games were razor thin and could have really gone either way. And I think they might be a little bit of a fool's goal at that capacity. And I think if they mash up with a team like the Bucs or even the Rams, I don't necessarily think that they should be the favorite.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to mention the special teams, because I could have easily seen that being an issue. Jakeem Grant and the Bears had a field day against the Packers special teams unit when they played the Bears. That was one of the biggest reasons why Chicago had control of the game through the first half, but they had too many other holes there to finish it off. But yeah, special teams could definitely be a thing. So, but focusing a little bit more on Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure you may have heard or got wind of comments that came from Hub Arkish. He is a Bears writer. Has been a Bears writer for a long time. So what is your take on his MVP vote comments? And do you think that this is like common for voters, and maybe some of them just don't voice their opinions publicly like Hub? For anybody that isn't aware, Hub Arkish essentially said that Aaron Rodgers would not get his MVP vote. He would not give his MVP vote to the biggest jerk in the league. So I want to know what your take is on that.
I can sort of see an argument, but on the whole, I don't buy it. I mean, it's not like Rodgers missed a ton of games. His teammates knew his status. He's been there, he's been the main reason they've won 13 games. And I think that's what you've got to look at as a whole. He's not a guy that's, losing the locker room. He's not a bad leader on the field. He doesn't carry the team in some ways and yet still act like, the biggest jerk or whatever he might want to make it seem. Like this guy's not Johnny Manziel there. He's not, he's not ruining the chemistry of the locker room. On the contrary, the Packers love him, and I think that says a lot to be determined. I feel like the Hub Arkish, Roger says he's a bum, but I think there's a bit of a bias there. I have a hard time believing that stems from just one incident this year. It feels like maybe there's something going back a ways, but he just doesn't seem to like Rodgers. And even if he felt that way, I mean, it was dumb of him to even open his mouth and say that. Because I think when you come out and say that as someone who has a vote on an MVP award, I think honestly that's a bad look for you.
Yeah, I think it's a bad look overall, man. It's a bad look for football. It's a bad look for a lot of things. But I do think it's probably common. I think there's people who do that all the time. They just are not like crazy enough to mention it publicly that's an influence in their decision. This is one of the biggest reasons why I'm a proponent of a statistical formula that gives an award for the most outstanding player, and then you still have the most valuable player that is voted on. I think there needs to be something in place that gauges just flat on the field, none of the other stuff, who was the best player, who had the best performance.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really interesting. It's so hard in football, though, because it is, we're looking at different positions. We're looking at, completely different situations. If, some guys playing, in an offense where they throw the ball, twice as often as they run the ball, as opposed to the alternative. Things like that really play such a big role. I think that could definitely, play a bigger role in other sports. You look at basketball, player efficiency rating, PR has been one of the, best relevant indicators of overall performance. You look at baseball, wins above replacement, things like that. And those things I think are much easier to quantify, but football has always been so hard to quantify. I mean, I think you can look at that this year with the race really coming down to Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And Brady has so many great volume stats, but then Rodgers seems to have the edge when it comes to efficiency. But then you wonder, would Rodgers be quite as efficient if he was throwing the ball quite that much? And, if Brady didn't, Brady's receivers didn't have so many deflections that were ending up as interceptions, that sort of thing. So it is so hard to quantify that, but I definitely see where you're coming from, because when some of these award voters are just kind of going with their gut or how they feel and not trying to really take this process seriously, I think it does kind of discredit the whole idea.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Let's go talk a little bit of AFC here. Bill Belichick and the Patriots. This has been quite the resurgence. I don't know if anybody expected them to return right back to the postseason this year and still have an outside chance of winning the AFC East in Week 18. So how can you see, or what path can you see Belichick and the Patriots taking to getting through or past the first round of the playoffs?
I think in so many ways, this Patriots team is built for the playoffs. And it's going to be definitely a tough task for them either way. I think their most likely opponents are going to be the Bills. So we might see the matchup against the Bills for the third time in the last 2 months or so.
Right.
Or it'll be the Bengals, who are, one of the, top up-and-coming teams in the league and have such an explosive offense. But this Patriots team, it's great defensively. They force turnovers. They run the ball very well, and they play to their strengths with Mac Jones. We're talking about award voting, and a lot of people still think Mac Jones should win Rookie of the Year. I'm not on that bandwagon, because I think Belichick does a great job of putting him in position to succeed, but I don't think he's asked to do a whole lot. I think that's just fine for this team. I think they know what they expect from him, and they know they can win by playing to their strengths. And I think I think there is a road to success with that. We saw that they lost to the Bills a few weeks ago. But they did beat them in that game in Buffalo with the insane wind and the insane weather. So that certainly played a factor. But we know they can beat Buffalo. I also think with their defense, their ability, Belichick's ability to game plan around young quarterbacks, I certainly think they would, have a chance against the Bengals as well. So I could definitely see them winning that first game. And the fact that they will likely have to play on the road, I don't think that's going to make a huge difference, because Belichick's going to get these guys ready to go.
Yeah, and it's funny because Patriots have been notoriously just bad at home this year anyway. They've been better on the road. I don't know how much we can really make of that in the postseason, but in the regular season, it really hasn't seemed to matter where they're playing. It's more about how they play. Now, this year is this year for the Patriots, and I think no matter what happens in the postseason, I think there's already a sense of this was a successful season based off of where they were last year. So I would say do you think that New England's overall arrow is pointing up moving forward? And are there some free agents that you can see who would be likely targets for the Patriots where they are right now, considering, they've rebuilt quite a bit with some very talented young players through the draft, from Andre Stevenson, obviously Mac Jones, Christian Barmore on defense, Kyle Duggar on defense. And then there's some guys who haven't even really gotten an opportunity to get into main rotation that they've been able to get in the last 2 years of the draft. So in adding to that, knowing that Bill Belichick still wants to win right now, are there some names that you would think about?
I honestly haven't looked too far ahead to free agency this year, especially with the vast amount of guys that are probably going to get tagged by their teams, and all the kind of hesitation going into the season, because it really comes down to teams that are going to kind of part ways with players because they just don't fit into their overall I think outlook. And I think generally the Patriots do such a great job of grabbing guys who aren't, high up on the list of highly sought after free agents. This is one of the first years where I really saw them kind of dip their toes into free agency. Getting Judon on that contract, that's been a huge get for them. Godchow at defensive line, those have been some great additions for them. But at the same time, you see them trade away Gilmore. They've always been very much focused on the system and doing, getting guys that fit their system, but getting rid of guys when they don't fit that system anymore. So, there's no one that really jumps off the page at me. I haven't looked a whole lot into upcoming free agency yet. But if the Patriots, make a splash in free agency, I see it kind of being those under the radar guys. Someone like Judon, who maybe wasn't a big name to your average fan, but was a productive guy for years and fit in really well at that kind of hybrid linebacker pass rushing position with the Patriots.
Yeah, I wrote a story. Former Patriot Marquise Flowers, who was a teammate of AJ Green when they were both in Cincinnati, really said he went hard to AJ Green this past offseason, telling him, man, you need to really sign and go play with the Patriots. And, Flowers only spent 1 year with the Patriots, but clearly there was a positive impact made on him because he's actually talking it up to former teammates. And now AJ is going to be a free agent, of course. And I think he's been one of the most underrated signings of the offseason. I don't think anybody thought he would be able to produce at the level he has. And they've really needed him considering DeAndre Hopkins has been hurt most of the year. That screams to me a Patriots-like signing because he's 34 years old. He could be that downfield kind of a receiver and a red zone target. What is the match like, do you think, if potentially, obviously, this is all speculation, but AJ Green in New England?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a good fit. A couple years ago when they made that trade for Sanu, I was, at that time, I really was hoping that was when Brady was still there, and I was really hoping they could add someone like Green to kind of, put them over the top at the time. Obviously, we know Green's not quite at that level anymore, but that's the sort of smart veteran move that I think would be a really good fit with the Patriots. They definitely need a few more explosive targets for Mac Jones, and I think, getting guys in these bargain contracts, getting guys that other teams, might not have the greatest amount of faith in. I think that's definitely a Patriots move for sure.
Yeah, sounds something that would be interesting to me if it happened. Let's talk about the Bengals. There's a growing sentiment that the Bengals are a serious Super Bowl contender as they start to build up towards the beginning of the postseason. Do you buy that?
I honestly don't. And I don't mean this as a knock against them because I think the future is very bright in Cincinnati. Huge Joe Burrow fan. But the main reasons I don't think they can quite cut it is offensive line play. I don't think that they could protect Burrow enough once, these teams in the playoffs start bringing the heat on him every down. On defense, I think their biggest weakness is on the boundaries with their cornerbacks. These cornerbacks are not great, and you're going to be going up against some really high-flying offenses. You're going to be going up against your Tyreek Hills, your A.J. Browns. Those are the guys you need to get by in the playoffs, and I don't know if they're built for that. The other main thing is just experience. As great as Burrow are, as great as Chase is, these are guys that haven't been playoff tested. And it's not just them. I mean, they're young for sure. Burrow in his second year, Chase in his first. But, you even look at the veterans on this team, and they haven't really been in the playoffs either. They don't know what it takes. And, you're going up against a murderer's row in the AFC where you've got, teams like the Bills that have been knocking on the door, teams like the Patriots that have been there time and time again, the Chiefs, all those teams. So I think all that considered, I don't think they're a genuine contender this year. But I do think that they are very well built. They've got a lot of balance on both sides of the ball. I like the fact that they run the ball well and aren't just too reliant on Burrow to throw it up every time. And I think that, I think in the future things are good for them. Certainly think they can win that first game at home, regardless of who they play. But I think the road to the Super Bowl would be very, very, very tough for them.
Yeah, it could be tough. But I know that on the other side, Bengals supporters are going to say, well, we just beat the Chiefs. And it was, on the strength of a Herculean performance from Jamar Chase, which brings me to my next question. And you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I'm sure you were referring to him when you're talking about the Rookie of the Year race. So do you think that people who are favoring Mac Jones as the Rookie of the Year are kind of sliding Chase simply because he's not a quarterback?
Absolutely. I'm going to be perfectly honest. That seems to be the case almost every year. I remember when Baker Mayfield a few years ago, we've seen now what Mayfield could do, but he was getting all that Rookie of the Year buzz. And I think Mac Jones, the quarterback is the most important position on the field, absolutely. But I think you've got to take into account the fact that a lot of the times the offense doesn't ask him to do a whole lot, which is great. I think that's great for the team, but it doesn't reflect on Mac Jones as an individual player. And this is an individual award. I think Chase has by far been the best offensive rookie in the league. And to be perfectly honest, I'd probably put Rashawn Slater over Mac Jones, but I know offensive linemen always kind of get the shaft when it comes to these things. But Mac Jones, great season, absolutely. But I think Chase should be the Rookie of the Year. And if I had a personal vote, it would be for me, it'd be tight between Chase and Slater.
Yeah, I would have to, kind of concur with you there. And it just kind of goes to almost to some of the MVP conversation we were having. And it also kind of spins a little bit into the Hall of Fame situation. Like anyone who says like Devin Hester shouldn't be a Hall of Famer, he was only a returner. It's crazy because in football, there's these very specific roles, but it's unfair if there are certain accolades and things that are not going to be accessible to a player if they were exclusive to a specific role. Devin Hester was the greatest return man that ever played football. If that guy can't get into the Hall of Fame, then there's no return man ever that can get in. So if that's the case, it can't be fair. Jamar Chase, you couldn't hardly have a better rookie season as a receiver. Maybe the only other rookie I can remember having this much impact was Randy Moss as a rookie. So if he's not the rookie of the year, and it's only because he's not a quarterback, it's just not a fair situation. So I totally agree with you there. Last question. Odds makers, when they're setting the lines for the playoffs amidst all of what's going on with COVID issues, right? Can you kind of talk a little bit about what goes into consideration at that time period? And then, like, I guess the second part of that, with those COVID protocols in mind for this year, are there some games in week 18 that you're like, yes, this is a perfect example of how we would have to adjust because of what's going on from a COVID standpoint?
This is a really tough scenario to be in because, no one's really been in it before, and that includes odds makers. And I think as far as they're concerned, they want to, take as much, they want to make as much money during the NFL playoffs as possible, take as many bets as possible, but also at the same time, they want to avoid, you losing a bunch of money or putting it in positions which aren't great when you're not 100% sure of the line. So I think the biggest thing we're going to see, is we're going to see a little bit more of a hesitation. We are going to see lines, in the past, we've seen lines come out immediately after we know the matchups for the next week. I think you're going to see, bigger limits earlier in the week. You're going to see these lines take shape over the week, going to be a little bit more fluid. And I think overall, though, I think it's going to be tough because so much can change on a day-to-day basis, especially like you mentioned with the new COVID rules. Now if you test positive, but then you can test negative or asymptomatic, or if you've already tested positive, then it doesn't matter if you test positive again for 90 days. There's all these things to keep in mind, and I think with so many scenarios at play, I think the big thing you'll notice is you'll be able to see some fluidity in these lines. And as a bettor myself, I'm hesitant to bet really anything until I get closer to kickoff, until I know what I'm going to see about who's going to be on the field, who's not, that sort of thing. Because, you can get some value by maybe grabbing a team when you think someone's not going to play before they completely aren't going to play. But that value, most of the time, odds makers know that stuff before you. That stuff's baked into the lines. So unless you're an insider with some sort of knowledge behind the scenes, you're not getting that information any faster than an odds maker. And by the time you kind of put it into your handicapping, the odds makers have already built it in. So you're not really gaining any advantage by that. I think if you're not sure about the status of a team with hit by a lot of COVID, just wait it out until you are before you put your money down.
Yeah, that's a great tip, man. The key word is patience. And always is in this situation, and understanding that you are more than likely not going to know more than the odds maker. You're not going to know more. So I really appreciate your time today, Rohit. Hopefully we get an opportunity to chat again. Great talking NFL with you.
Yeah, you bet, man. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Yes, sir. You too.